There's Look, Daisuke Shindo is somebody that I can talk about forever. Out of all the characters that I have created, out of all of the things that I have written, his backstory, the backstory of what happens to Japan after X Day in 2045, is my favorite thing. And in my opinion, it's the greatest thing that I've created, even though half of the stuff that I created for him, in all honesty, isn't necessarily important to the plot. Now, that being said, because of that, there is nothing I'm spoiling in these videos. You see, concerning the Godzilla Saga is nothing but lore videos. They're tidbits of information that you don't necessarily need in order to enjoy the upcoming books, but they can help enrich the setting nonetheless. And that's the point of concerning the Godzilla Saga. It's not here to spoil anything of what happens or why people are the way they are. It's just to help. You don't need this additional information in order to enjoy the stories, and I can't say that enough. If you wish to hear about Daisuke Shindo and the state of Japan by 2045, please listen to the episode entitled Shindo's Japan. But to make a long story short, a massive earthquake and tsunami sinks Tokyo and basically most of Japan's eastern coast, and killing millions of people within an hour, and including the in-session Japanese parliament, which is bad. Japan is left basically without a government. And the result is a power vacuum that splits the main body of Japan into small, feudal-like states, where survivors basically all fought for power. Now this is except for Colonel Daisuke Shindo, his second-in-command General So Nakao, and a series of high-end and rich industrialists who sweep the south from Hokkaido, which is where they were stationed, and reunite the country. It was heavily inspired by Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. Shindo did not care how it was done, but that it was just done. He ordered the deaths of many, including many within his own circle, and made himself, in essence, the new emperor of Japan. He creates an elite police force, officially called the Homeland Police Force, but are commonly known by the masses as the Red Collars, because of their uniforms having a dark red collar. They adhere to the rule of Shindo, and the rule of Shindo only. There are still local police set up, don't get me wrong, it would be insane if there wasn't, but they are mainly puppets compared to the Red Collars. Now that being said, though Shindo is by far the most powerful individual in Japan, he knows, and is smart enough to know, that he can't do it all on his own. He thus creates something called the Council of 10, which are 10 individuals who all meet in New Tokyo whenever summoned by Shindo to discuss future plans for the nation. As I just stated, there are no set meetings. It's always decided by Shindo when they are to meet, and if one person cannot make it, they are simply left out of the equation, making it a tough yet necessary part of being in Shindo's government. His second-in-command is in charge of enforcing Shindo's every will, and this is called a deputy leader, and that is currently General So Nakao. Underneath the deputy leader is the chief of staffs. One is for the homeland, and the other is for foreign affairs. The homeland leader is in command of all things JSDF related by Nakao, who would have to be ordered by Shindo. This is currently General Tadashi Aigwo, who is devoted to Shindo. And then the Chief of Foreign Affairs is more of a puppet position than anything else. It is given to General Igarashi. This is more or less a punishment than anything else, and this is due to Igarashi's vocal stance against Shindo's new form of provisional government, and that's what Shindo calls this. He doesn't call this a permanent government, even though Shindo has no intentions of relinquishing power. And Igarashi goes even far enough to design his own uniform that basically is the opposite of every other general's uniform. If you look at the standard general uniforms, they are black, and they usually have either a light gray, shoulder pad, or a dark one, depending on their rank. Igarashi specifically makes a white one. And because of Igarashi's vocal stance against Shindo's new form of government, Shindo basically sends him to the powerful UN as a puppet, where Nakao, specifically Nakao, can control his every move. Underneath the chiefs of staffs are the governors. Japan is split into 3 states, essentially. You have the north, the middle, and the south. These people are simply to run the daily affairs of each section. The stuff Shindo doesn't have time for. Because on paper, these people had basically free reign to run their states the way they see fit. This includes hierarchy and rule of law, and even how the local police force is used. However, they must, under all circumstances, obey the will of Shindo, and they always oblige. Because these people were directly picked by Shindo, not for necessarily their brains or their wits, but because of their devout loyalty to him personally. So again, he has direct control over them. Shindo makes it a point that these 3 people are not military, but civilian. And what he does this for is, it's a gesture of good faith, though they are basically puppets of Nakeo and Shindo. Now, the chief of the police is in charge of the Red Collars, and his only job is to impose the will of Shindo onto the people of Japan. And he must do so without question or hesitation. Shindo's rule is law. Finally, there are 3 civilian advisors, and they are picked by the governors, and there is 1 per state. They simply advise Shindo on the state of the people. They are the voice of the people, the representatives of the people, but again, they're handpicked by the governors. They have little power in the Council of 10, but are a good voice for both General Nakeo, the chief of police, and Shindo himself. Now, under Shindo, things are extremely regimented, and the hierarchy is important. And this is similar to the old rule of the emperor before World War II, but even then there were tons of positions that were just created for the sake of bureaucracy, even though they might sound important. They weren't really important in general. And in fact, many of the admirals could go out there and do whatever they wanted to do, even if they contradicted what the overall plan was. To Shindo says that led to the ultimate corruption of the Japanese people, and also to the eventual downfall of the nation. X-Day just happened to speed things along. Shindo always knew that Japan was going to collapse underneath its own bureaucracy. And so he constantly preached in seminars and meetings, and those who he trained as a colonel in the JSDF in Hokkaido, that hierarchy is important. There must be structure. There must be order. Shindo's first priority is to rebuild what they can. And because of the lack of bureaucracy and a small and powerful government, mainly run by the JSDF, this is done effectively and rather quickly. People are fed, people are sheltered, and all things are quote-unquote fine. And this cements Shindo as basically the savior of most of the Japanese people. They seriously look at him like a savior. He literally came down from the north and saved them from total destruction, from starvation. He gave people the medical supplies that they desperately needed. He gave them what they needed to survive, electricity, power, after this horrible devastation. And then comes Shindo. And I mean the vast, vast majority. Of course, there are outliers. I mean, Igarashi is one, but there's other people that do oppose Shindo's provisional government and his form because they think it's absolutely tyrannical. In many ways, it is. He and his newly formed Council of 10 push for a new Japan for Japan motto, basically promoting self-dependence. And thus, this is a very nationalistic stance in a world where nationalism isn't very much favored upon, especially in the UN. This includes raising their own food, making their own energy, making their own industries, and not relying on other nations. At first, Shindo admits that he must import vast quantities of steel from America and China. America more than willingly supplies this due to their recent deregulation of foreign trade, allowing American industries to export whatever amount of metal they wanted. And Shindo's ties with the Japanese industrialists that remained after X-Day make him well off with purchasing more steel for quote-unquote future plans, and I'll just leave it at that. No, Shindo is very isolationist, but not in the sense of like North Korea, where they're just dumb and they don't feed their people. No, Shindo knows how to keep his people in line, be it by brute force or be it by how kind he is. But he bases his idea off of the old American motto, which was actually very liberal. Again, funny how the roles have reversed in this universe, and I made another video talking about that. But he bases his idea off of the American motto, which is very isolationist, especially after the disaster that was the Second Iraq-Iran War. And only recently, again through this deregulation of trade, have companies now suddenly been like, okay, now we can export again, we can now import from other countries. And that was just recently lifted by the time Shindo finally took power, and Shindo took full advantage of this. But the most important thing Shindo tackles with the rebuilding of Japan is energy. In order for anything to work, you need energy. And for the most part, the world relies on oil. Oil will always need to be imported. Japan simply doesn't have any. And so Shindo gets inspired by, again, America in the mid-20 teens. He uses American blueprints that he steals to build multiple nuclear reactors that can basically power homes, heat homes, and let the country basically power its infrastructure by themselves. The total number of these reactors basically double. As time goes along, Shindo and his council decide to shift their focus solely upon technology. Shindo knows he needs something to keep him securely in power. However, Japan's #1 export from their foreign economy becomes his inspiration. Shindo focuses on making Japan the most technologically advanced nation in the world. And he lets this happen by basically unshackling the remaining industrialists. He taxes them very little, but in exchange dictates what individual companies are to focus on. They make the first truly functional electronic car for the masses, which then extends into building tanks able to run by 2 people instead of 5 or 6. They also begin to work on weapons that do not need to have your standard ammunition. With this massive advancement in technology, Shindo quickly discovers his ability to obtain and use information fed online and from other countries, and also from within. He places General Nakao in charge of overseeing their industrial heart, and shifts his own personal focus on the exchanging of information, which puts the President of the United States in his bed very quickly. This information is often bought by other nations looking to get a leg up on the other country, and Shindo lets this industry become a highly profitable industry on its own to help fuel his ever-growing technological army. And by the time the UN gets whiff of this, it's simply too late. Shindo has single-handedly become the most powerful individual in the world. He can have dirt on anyone literally at any time, which secures his position as, essentially, dictator for life, not only in Japan, but also a force to be reckoned with on the world stage. If someone from within or from outside tried to spin Shindo as a monster, or even try to dispose of him, he would release all information that would incriminate that individual, and thus incapacitate them. People don't realize how one bad thing said about them can result in the deaths of careers. And we've definitely seen that lately with, the whole sexual harassment thing, whether the allegations are true or not. If you get accused of sexual harassment, your career is over in this country now. If you try to go up against him, he will pull every little bit of dirt on you and release it. And you're fucked. This could be given to enemies, allies, or even one-on-one for smaller cases, which he has done. And it is the reason that Japan remains in the UN. The UN constantly wants to kick Japan out, simply because it's a dictator. And that's what Shindo is, and Shindo doesn't deny it. He's very much like a Caesar of Rome, an emperor. And the UN hates that, and they want to kick him out. They're looking for any excuse possible to kick to kick Japan out of the UN. But they are afraid of Shindo's dirt on them. Despite a lot of vocal voices saying, get out of the UN, no one really can. So in the end, like AN Productions on Facebook for all up-to-date information we're doing there. Like my new film, Sierra. We're making a new film, ladies and gentlemen, a new short film. And it's an action film. We got people from LA coming in, people who starred in shows like Better Call Saul. It's great. I'm so excited to make that film. Like the Godzilla Saga for all up-to-date information on how these books are going. More videos on the topic of the Godzilla Saga will be released shortly. And in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.